Hi, and welcome to this online webinar with ShipStation and DHL Express. My name is Mark Van Bree, and I'm the Global Director of Partner Marketing here at ShipStation. I'll be your host, and mostly on the background, I'll keep running things smoothly. We're excited to have our friends at DHL join us here for this event. I appreciate their time to share their expertise in global shipping here for everyone. Before we get started, quick couple of housekeeping notes. And before I introduce our panelists as well, quick housekeeping notes. All attendees are muted. You will have the opportunity to ask questions at any time during the chat. Your questions can be submitted via the Q&A box in your Zoom panel. You don't have to wait for our Q&A time at the end of the webinar. Feel free to submit your questions at any time, and we'll keep an eye out for them. Any questions we won't get to? We've had quite a few questions coming in already. We've had quite a few registrants, so any questions we won't be able to get to, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. If you have any technical webinar questions or about audio or anything, feel free to drop in the Q&A as well. We'll do our best to drop in any kind of help or support there, or phone numbers to call into for audio. Lastly, this webinar will be recorded and we'll email you when it's available for viewing. So a quick, before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. We'll of course be talking about regulatory, legal, tax points. Neither ShipStation or DHL provide specific advice here, and you're encouraged to seek your own legal, tax, and compliance counsel for your businesses. All right, so what will we be talking about today? We'll start by quickly showing you how to enable DHL Express from ShipStation, how to enable those rates within the app. Then we'll go into the export checklist and customs trinity. Then we'll briefly cover the process from cart to label and automating those international shipping settings. We'll dive into more details around paperwork, taxes, and tax IDs. And we'll finish with export control, reducing delivery friction with tracking and lockers, as well as providing some resources. And lastly, of course, we'll get to the questions and answers. So let's meet our speakers for today. We're glad to welcome our guest from DHL Express, George Duchesne, Senior Manager of Export Compliance for DHL Express. George is a true expert in international shipping and U.S. export compliance policies, and we're excited to have him share his valuable insights here on this webinar. From the ShipStation side, we have Chris Spillane. He's a Senior Area Sales Manager with more than 25 years of experience in the carrier and shipping software ecosystems, including time at DHL. We're excited to have Chris here share his insights on how ShipStation makes international shipping and compliance more efficient. So with that, Chris, you're up first to talk us through enabling ShipStation DHL Express rates in our app to start saving on those international shipping.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone here today. So getting started to enable DHL Express. With our partnership with DHL, we're able to offer our customers up to 81% off of DHL Express international services. And so that includes international door-to-door delivery service. It's an express service. We call it kind of like the Cadillac of international services. It provides express delivery, which includes custom clearance and end-to-end tracking. In order to enable DHL Express within ShipStation, it's very, very simple. Customers just go to settings and then carriers, and then you simply add DHL as a carrier. So that's basically it to be done in order to get started with DHL Express.
Awesome. And once you get started with DHL Express, there's some things that you want to, consider when you're shipping internationally. So as we said at the beginning of the call, you want to do your due diligence, make sure that you understand who your customers are, what the requirements are for shipping into the country where they live. Make sure that you understand, the U.S. regulatory compliance side of things, and we'll talk a lot about that here later on in the presentation. But we'll also talk about what we mentioned earlier, the customs trinity. That'll be coming slides here. Not talking the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost here, but a different set of three. Understanding the paperwork, with knowing your duties and tax implications, as well as like I said, just being prepared. You never know what's gonna come up depending on what you're exporting and where you're sending it to and who's receiving it. There are different set of requirements that might be triggered. Alrighty, so part of that preparation process is understanding, what your items are, the classifications of those goods. The U.S. classifications from a Schedule B or HS perspective, as well as the importing countries' HS classifications. So the World Customs Organization has a set standard for HS codes. So the first 6 characters in an HS code are harmonized among all the WCO members. And then the last 4 really determine the duties and taxes when importing into your destination country. You also want to make sure that, the items that you are exporting are, what are the values of those items? Even if you're sending them as free samples, they still have a fair market value. So you need to understand that, provide that fair market value, and make sure that the values of the items that you are declaring for export from the United States on your shipping documents match the value of the items that your customers may have to show proof of purchase to the destination country customs. And then rules of origin. So where are your items from? So just because they're being shipped from the United States doesn't mean they're U.S. origin goods. So if they're manufactured in China, brought to the United States, and then re-exported without any substantial transformation, they're still Chinese origin goods. If those items were maybe incorporated into some other end product and there was a substantial transformation, then maybe the origin rules would shift and it would be a U.S. item. So you want to understand those rules of origin. So make sure that when you're exporting that you harvest, and I think that this is true for ShipStation, that you can't complete your order unless you have all the shipper and consignee information. But it's worth mentioning that we get your full name, address, phone number, email, include that full description that I was just talking about, and the value of your goods and the origin of those items. All righty.
So preparing your shipment, yes, like George said, it's necessary to collect all the information from the customers. One important thing that is needed to be captured is the telephone number for those international orders. The great thing about ShipStation that it is syncs with your marketplace where you're receiving your orders, right? So it's syncing up, and it's going to verify certain international addresses. Canada, for example, we're able to verify those addresses. But it's important to get the address accurate. ShipStation will also kind of alert you if there is an error that's been identified with the address. It's in order for the shipment to go through and be delivered properly, that you capture this information at order entry, and then verify it through ShipStation. And then ShipStation has the functionality to kind of set product defaults. So that makes it a lot simpler, when you're creating and shipping an order, that you're not having to re-key in maybe the product description and details over and over again, right? So it can store this information by a name. The example here is it's a large men's soccer shirt, right? And so it includes the description, what the declared value is, Also, the harmonized code. The harmonized code is kind of an international trade number that identifies really what the product is. So there's some lookup tools that are available to kind of determine what your harmonized code is. It also will store the country of origin, which is important as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that certainly makes it easy for your customers, Chris. Harvesting all that information, storing it, you know, um, making it so that that they don't have to look up the codes every time, and it sounds like you're also able to import their database information and store everything by maybe SKU or item number as well, so that that makes it really simple when it comes to the paperwork side, because you've already harvested all that line item information, to make it an easy passage into the importing country. So, we'll touch on, so you want to make sure that, when the shipment is going to destination, that you identify who the importer of record is, if it's somebody other than your customer. So generally the importer of record will default to, to the ship to party as the importer of record, but in some cases, some situations, your customer may want to identify somebody else as their importer of record. We already talked through the full commodity description and value of the goods, and ShipStation makes it easy to put that information in there every time and accurately. The same with the harmonized tariff codes, so good there. The terms of sale, so there may be situations where the duties and taxes are being paid for on the front end. In some countries, that's easy to do. Other countries, not so easy to do when you're exporting from the United States. But yeah, you want to make sure that your terms are identified there. Make sure your other paperwork is in order. So all this really going to be done automatically for the ShipStation customer. The airway bill or the transport label is going to be filled out automatically based off the information that's harvested during the order. The same with the commercial invoice. There may be some situations where you want to provide a certificate of origin to take advantage of preferential trade or reduced duties in some countries. So you could prepare a CO. From a U.S. perspective, there might be an opportunity for an export declaration. So it's not really a document; it's more of an electronic document. So if we have a shipment that contains a single item over $2,500 and it's not going to Canada, where we have an exemption from these export declarations, you'll provide your information so that or actually in the ShipStation situation, does ShipStation allow for customers to provide or to have somebody else file AES on their behalf, the automated export system? Chris, do you know?
I am not
From an
positive.
export declaration?
Yeah, I could find that. I'm not positive.
Yeah. So in the DHL world, if a exporter wanted DHL to file on their behalf and do that export declaration, we'd gather just a little bit more information other than what was already gathered during the line item description phase, which would be the exporter's EIN or employer ID number, tax ID number. So in very few instances, a packing list would be required, but a lot of exporters provide one just as a way of verifying the contents in addition to the commercial invoice. What else do we have?
So really the last thing you do is just to check the label for the CPLT. So that means that all the international documentation has been transferred electronically. So the information associated with your shipment kind of precedes the shipment from entering that country. So really it's kind of like it clears customs before the package actually even arrives.
Yeah. And I was just going to say on that part. So even if the DHL would image those documents and start that clearance in the air before the shipment even arrived, even if for some reason some of the documents were tendered manually rather than all uploaded electronically.
So one thing to note, that it's important to set clear expectations with your customers on taxes and duties. Currently, DHL through ShipStation does not offer delivery duty paid. So it's important to let your customers know the shipping policy. Also at checkout, including the rates, order and shipment confirmation. Most international customers are aware that they're most likely going to have to pay duties and taxes when they receive their package. But it's important just to kind of let them know up front what to expect. And so through ShipStation, you can automatically add your tax ID, either one or more tax numbers to your account. And that can be done by going through the international settings through the shipping tab. You can automate adding your tax number to specific destinations, which also gets added to your customs declaration paperwork.
Alrighty, so that some of that tax information will be harvested or can be, at least input, to help expedite the export clearance process. So thank you, Chris. So some of the common things as we see in my line of work is that customers are adverse to provide specific detailed descriptions of their goods. For whatever reason, they just want to provide clothing and a nominal value for that clothing. But especially in the e-commerce world, you want to provide as good and detailed description as possible, and you want that description and the value of those goods to match the proof of purchase that your buyer overseas is going to be providing to customs. That customs doesn't always demand that proof of purchase, but when they do, that information has to match. Otherwise, the shipment is going to incur a delay importing to the destination. Make sure that the paperwork is complete, which, from a ShipStation perspective, you guys really, they can't complete their shipment unless they have, a good invoice and, a house bill. So that's awesome. Make sure that you don't have, partial names, so Mr. George is not a very good name when it comes to clearing an item in the United States for George Duchesne. It should be George Duchesne. And also, the commodities that you're exporting may have controls in place, even though you can buy them off the shelf in the United States. If you want to send, night vision goggles that you buy from Cabela's to Venezuela, you're probably going to need an export license in order to do that. So just be aware that there are some export controls in place from the United States perspective. And, for some items like items that you would expect to be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration in the United States would probably, require some sort of Ministry of Health or some other type of authorization when importing into the destination country. So be aware that, names, addresses are fed to an application on the DHL side to screen for denied or restricted parties. But our export data is also accessible by the U.S. government or by the destination governments for targeting and enforcement and whatnot. So just be aware of that. So that's another reason why it's really important that you provide complete names. If you have George Vincent Duchesne, if you have like a person's complete name, not just their first and last name, provide that as well. That will help with the screening. And then the Customs and Border Protection has the authority at the U.S. border to inspect anything that leaves or intends to leave the United States. So be aware of that. And the same for the importing countries. Border protection agencies are going to, on occasion, do inspections just to make sure that the shipments that are entering their territory are what they say they are. All right, so we touched a little bit about this earlier. So, there are three main types of export controls or regimes that determine export control. So you have a commodity-based control, like the night vision goggles that I was talking about earlier. If they're off-the-shelf night vision goggles that you can get at a sporting goods store, those are generally going to be controlled by the Export Administration regulations. But if these are very sophisticated night vision goggles with the latest technology, these are going to be regulated by the International Traffic in Arms regulations, which regulates controlled military items from the United States to make sure that if you're exporting something like this, that the right authorizations are in place. So the items that are controlled by the ITA are probably not going to be sold or shipped or exported by folks that use ShipStation. But it's a control regime that you should be aware of. Who the items are going to. Those there are restrictions for some entities, so they might be on a government watch list, but they may have exceptions. So if it's a debarred party, that's somebody who doesn't have the authority to export items that would be controlled by the International Traffic in Arms regulations. So even though they're a debarred party, if you're sending them tables and chairs or low-level controlled items, they can still receive them. So there may be some other parties, say that have other restrictions. Maybe there are the Bureau of Industry and Security's validated end users list. So the Bureau of Industry and Security, which is part of the Department of Commerce, hasn't been able to vet this party overseas through embassy outreach or something like that. So they pay close attention to items that are being shipped to these parties, and the restriction would be that you would have to get an end user statement from the recipient if they were a validated end user, and you'd have to do an AES filing regardless of value. And then the highest level of control that we have is the denied parties themselves. So if you're especially designated terrorist organization, or if you are on the Office of Foreign Assets Control specially designated nationals list, you cannot receive items from the United States. So it would be illegal for DHL to facilitate in the export of an item to one of these denied parties. So that's why it's very important that you know who you're doing business with, and the U.S. government has a consolidated screening list for folks to bump names up against and to screen their parties to the transaction. And then the last control we're going to talk about are the country-based controls. So I mentioned, if you're going to send some off-the-shelf night vision goggles to Venezuela, you probably would need a license from the U.S. government to do that. If you're sending it to Canada, probably not. But the U.S. government has, comprehensive embargoes and like less comprehensive embargoes against many countries. So if the U.S. is trying to get a country to change its ways, maybe be better on human rights and whatnot, that they end up on a comprehensive sanctions list. So we've got Cuba, Iran, Syria, North Korea, the region of Crimea. These are 5 destinations where, regardless of what you're exporting, you're probably going to need a license if you're sending items to these destinations. There are exceptions, humanitarian relief and whatnot, but for the most part, you're going to need a license. Alrighty, so we've already touched on a lot of these organizations already. I mean, from a DHL Express perspective, since we deal with Air Express Cargo, the FAA is part of it. But the Office of Foreign Assets controls. These are the folks that we just mentioned who manage the country-based restrictions, along with the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security. So they're the ones that hold the purse strings for different parties that end up on the watch list that OFAC manages, so that the State Department can get different type of behavior out of these folks. And the Fish and Wildlife folks pretty much regulate the import and export of fish and wildlife items. So, and also the convention or the CITES items as well. The Department of Commerce, these are the folks that are export enforcement officers. So they don't have the same type of authority as U.S. Customs has at the border on imports and exports, just on the export side. So then we have the customs folks, the State Department. Customs probably are that's the organization that DHL works with most often. These are the folks that ask us to provide them with export information so that they can do targeting. These are the folks that we're clearing shipments with. And at all of our hubs and gateways, we have customs officers on site, whereas the other agencies really don't have the same level of I guess not cooperation, but exposure. And then the State Department, these are the folks that generally are going to be dealing with the controlled military items, the Department of Transportation, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I have to put my glasses on to see that last one here. The Treasury. Sorry, these are the folks that we do our export declarations to. They gather the statistical information to make sure that there's good information for calculating our trade balance or imbalance. So they harvest all of the import clearance information as well as all the export declaration information, and decide whether or not we have a trade imbalance. But they also provide information to exporters to help them understand what countries around the world are buying what types of U.S. products. I think that's it.
So one of the things that's probably most important to customers is visibility on their shipment, right? And so with DHL, the customers can see door-to-door tracking, right? So it really reduces complaints, concerns. We call them WSMO calls when a customer reaches out to you and says, "Where is my package?" Communication is key. A lot of times the information associated with the package is more important to the customer than what's in the box. It reduces the amount of complaints at the end of the day. If packages are stuck in customs, door-to-door tracking of those problems by just really enabling better, clear, frequent communication. Customer is able to see where their package every step of the way. And it creates an overall good experience, right? Most customers today start tracking their package just a couple hours after they place an order. And DHL Express, like I said earlier on the call, it truly is kind of like the Cadillac of international shipping. They handle it every step of the way. And it's a big differentiator between some of the other options there are to ship internationally. But really their end-to-end door-to-door tracking is really first class. And so I think that's it here.
Yeah, thank you for saying so. Yeah, I mean, DHL is harvesting information about the shipment's life, from inception to delivery. So, yeah, we're collecting data points every time it physically gets handled, by one of our facility agents, tracking, the departure of the aircraft, the arrival of the aircraft. So lots of checkpoints that were gathered throughout the life cycle of the shipment to provide you with the best information available on, where is my pack? Would you call it Wismo?
Wismo.
Where's my package? So yeah, so that provides everybody with some peace of mind. It cuts down on customer related calls and things of that nature. And then one of the other cool features of DHL is on demand delivery. So part of the reason why ShipStation harvests that recipient name, address, telephone number is so that if during the delivery portion of the shipment's life cycle, your customer wants to change how to receive that shipment, they can do that. So assuming that they have the number that was harvested is a good SMS number where they can receive texts, or the email address is good, they can go online and they can set up an alternate delivery location or a time for that delivery. And on the next page, they can even say, you know what, I am not going to be available to receive that package during normal business hours. Please send it to one of your DHL lockers, and I'll pick it up there. So it's and offers a nice convenient features so that your customers can pick up their packages regardless of the time of day that they're available to do that. So hopefully it makes everybody's life easier. All righty. So
Thank you, George, for
yes.
taking us through creating a great customer experience here with international shipments. Now, I know folks won't be able to click these links on the screen, of course, so we'll post them in the chat as well, and we'll make sure that these links will be included with a follow-up communication after this webinar. So you have all of these great resources. We've collected here some resources we've covered throughout the webinar from government websites with information about the export process, as well as an HS lookup tool from the US government. I know there were a couple of questions coming in already. We don't necessarily have a recommended HS lookup tool. I know DHL has a tool. I know there are several tools out there. What we link out here is a US government tool to look at those. There's also an article about the criteria around identifying rules of origin. I know both Chris and George talked about that, right? Where you set that in ShipStation and the importance of the rules of origin. But there might be some questions around how do you really identify that? So there's a government website around what those criteria are as well. And then, of course, our really fantastic ShipStation Help Center offers a lot of step-by-step instructions on international settings, presets, product defaults, some of the stuff that Chris has covered here on this webinar. There's a few more really in-depth articles that really take you step-by-step on how to set that up. But I think if there's one thing we've really learned here is that due diligence is important with international shipping, right? If you're just starting out, I would recommend starting out with markets that you're familiar with. Maybe you're already getting traffic from certain countries to your website, and you can use that to identify which countries that you open your sales to. And when you do open up to a specific country, again, due diligence, know what tax IDs you should use, know what needs to go on the label and in the declarations, communicate your policies. We've talked a lot about communicating here and setting expectations. And then automate those processes. So that's where ShipStation comes in, to automate those processes, maximize that efficiency, and reduce errors. Right, the more you have it set as clear cut in automation rules, and create some special alerts where you might need to. If you have a shipment to Brazil and you need to do something on that label for Brazil, you can set up alerts in ShipStation to alert you to those specific cases. Setting those clear expectations with customers, providing that door-to-door tracking, as we talked about, and reducing errors on your shipments, that will save you a lot of time and a lot of money. I think with that, we've really come to our question and answer segment. We've had quite a few questions coming in already. We'll take some time to talk through a couple of those questions. I think one recurring question in different forms, this question has come through. It's people who are asking about, I ship out samples, or I ship out a gift with purchase, or I ship out my shipments and I say it's a $1 value when it may not be a $1 value. So lots of questions around valuation. I know we covered that a little bit previously, but George, maybe you can kind of stress the importance of the valuation there, and what to do with samples or free gifts, or making sure that your valuation is accurate.
Yeah, I mean, even if there isn't money exchanging hands, so there was, these are unsolicited samples, and your customer didn't actually purchase them from you, but you're sending them to them in hopes that they will purchase them in the future. You still provide the fair market value of those items. So even though they didn't pay anything for them, the value of that item is the fair market value. So what would it cost if they had purchased those from you? Or an intercompany transfer is the same thing. If you're sending something to an affiliate overseas, but you're not charging them for that, you still need to provide the fair market value. And you may have to pay duties and taxes on it, but the flip side is you undervalue them, and the customs organization sees that as a violation, and they assess higher duties and taxes or a penalty for your recipient in order to clear them. So yeah, you want to make sure that value is in line with, especially if it's a published it's an item that can be easily found on the internet. The government agencies, regardless where they are in the world, they have phones, and they just Google the item. They find out what the value is.
Thank you, George. I think a couple of specific to ShipStation questions came up. A few people have asked about this. Does DHL Express for ShipStation offer pickup? Chris?
Yes. So within ShipStation, you can request a pickup. So it's very simple to arrange a pickup with DHL Express.
Perfect. Couple more questions coming in. What if you're sending more than one product? I think Chris, you covered that in kind of the product defaults a little bit, but is there a way to add HS codes to all items for that shipment?
Yeah, so you can basically store your product, including the HS codes, right? So if you have an order with multiple products, it's going to pull that information and help complete the paperwork for you. So all of that can be stored kind of within the ShipStation database.
Great. We continue to get a couple of questions around pickup. I think we will make sure to include the article on our KB Center on specific step-by-step on how to schedule that pickup. It's within our app, within the ShipStation app. You can do it right from there. We'll make sure to include an article in our email that will go out to you as well to get those step-by-steps. We had a question about and George, as the export expert, this might be a good question for you. I know we talked about the international shipping stages. Shipments are checked both by the export country and the import country, correct?
They can be, yeah. I mean, the data is presented to both U.S. Customs and the destination country customs, and they have the authority to inspect the shipments if they want to. 99% of shipments, or more, less than 99.9% of the shipments that pass across out of the United States or into say Canada or the United Kingdom, they're not getting inspected, but they have the authority to inspect them.
All right. George, another question for you. How do we, and you covered a lot of the export controls already, but how do you find out what type of export controls our commodities may be subject to?
Yeah, so the folks at the Bureau of Industry and Security, they have a lot of online resources. So if you go to Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security, they have a whole licensing section. So they use the export classification number in combination with the destination country to determine when a license is required. So you could use their website for that. They also have folks on call throughout the day where you can call their hotline and ask specific questions of the BIS front end staff. And if they don't know the answer, or if it's something that they require a written submission, they'll ask you to do that, and then they can provide their classification, justification, license authorization, whatever information in writing to you.
Great. This is a question for Chris here, specifically on the ShipStation side. Dangerous goods for DHL Express on ShipStation. Is that a possibility to send? I think that answers.
It may be in the future. At this time, we're not supporting dangerous goods or hazmat.
Great. And what we'll do in the follow-up is we'll also include a link to a DHL resource to look at what is considered a dangerous good, so that merchants have some clarity around that as well. George, a question for you here again. What does controlled export mean?
Yeah, so so the vast majority of items that folks are going to be exporting are relatively low levels of control. So we talked about those three types of controls. Is it commodity, country, is it end user controls? So a controlled export generally is something that that requires authorization from the U.S. government before it can leave the United States. So if you were sending, like I said, those night vision goggles that you picked up at Cabela's to your buddy in Venezuela, you'd need authorization from the Bureau of Industry and Security in most cases, and that would be considered a controlled export. If you have controlled military items, if you've got F-35 parts for some reason, and you're sending them to a NATO ally, you would need it would be a controlled export. You'd need authorization from the Defense Directorate, Trade Control, Department of State, because those are ITAR regulated items.
Thank you. Let's see, a couple more questions coming in. Lots of questions coming in. If electronic documents are sent, is there a need for any additional documents for customs? I'm sure that's it depends answer, George. But would you like
Yeah,
to?
I would say, that 90% of the destination countries that you're shipping into, electronic documents are just fine. But there may be some instances where a manual document is required, but the majority is going to be electronic is fine. And I don't know if the PLT process. I assume that the PLT process within ShipStation is aligned with the countries where the electronic documents aren't um, uh, available. But I'm not positive. That'd be a Chris question.
Yep.
I know
Great.
that so from a DHL perspective, within our shipping applications, there's the majority of countries you can do or paperless transactions to, and I assume the same system automation specifications carry over to ShipStation,
They do,
so
yes.
that so that they're aligned.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. In doing due diligence, where's a good place to start? George, you wanna take that question as well?
Sure. Yeah. So again, know who your customers are. So screen them using the consolidated screening list. The U.S. government has. You can just Google consolidated screening list, and it'll pop up. But you can access it through the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security. So make sure you're not doing business with unsavory characters, right? Some other type of due diligence would be, if there's a red flag, maybe pause the transaction and get more information. So if you're sending, sophisticated, electronic equipment to a bakery in the United Arab Emirates, maybe you want to figure out what they're going to use that for, so you know maybe they're going to transship it to Iran, using their centrifuges or something like that. But just understand, that not everybody out there is looking to I guess purchase items and use them for their own enjoyment, but there are some nefarious characters out there. The majority of the time, you're not going to account for that. But do your due diligence, understand, the requirements of the country that you're shipping into. Like I said, if an item would be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration coming in the United States, odds are there's going to be a similar, government agency at the destination country that you're going to need, some sort of permit from in order to, export, beauty products or something that somebody would ingest.
Right. Thank you, George. I think, Chris, we had a couple of questions coming in around ensuring your shipments. I know in ShipStation we have some options for that, even to apply some automation rules to that as well. But you want to talk a little bit about that, Chris?
Sure. So we offer parcel guard insurance. So if you wanted to insure your package, George, I'm not positive. Does DHL Express ought to come with $100 automatic insurance?
I believe it's $100. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the standard insurance that comes from the carrier. If you're looking to offer or to insure your package for a value higher than that, you can do that through Parcel Guard, and it's really simple. It's really a matter of just checking off that you want to insure it and put it in how much you want to insure it for, whether it's the full declared value of the shipment or possibly less. So there's some options there for customers that have a need to insure their packages.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I know you can you can set up automation rules on the ShipStation side for that as well. So, if there's a certain value threshold where you want to add insurance, you can do so by automation rules as well.
Yeah, and if it's certain certain products, right, that you want to insure, you can set those defaults so that whenever that product is sent, it comes with insurance.
Right. We are getting quite a few questions. I think we're still getting a few questions on very specific like declared value items as well. So just to kind of go back to that, I think we had questions about well, if I'm replacing a product to maybe it was broken or something, or you're sending another product to that same customer, do you then again have to declare that same value, or can you set it as 0 because the customer already paid for it? Or so there's some very specific situations there, but I imagine, George, the rules on valuation are pretty black and white on the custom side.
Yeah, again, even if they're replacement parts or free samples, or still the fair market value is generally going to be the value that you have to provide. You should mark that, on the shipping documents, that these are replacement parts, or maybe they're free samples, unsolicited samples, not for consumption, or something like that, and you may receive preferential duty treatment importing into the country. But yeah, it kind of depends on the country itself. But yeah, generally it's going to be the fair market value is what you're going to want to put in most occasions.
Great. I think we're coming up on time. Maybe room for one or two more questions. I think I just had it in my head. What question? I just lost it. But yeah, I think we're still getting a few questions here around, I'm starting out. Any advice for kind of newbies? I mentioned it on the resource slide as well. Start with what you know. But Chris, George, Chris on the ShipStation side, any advice on starting out with international shipping?
Yeah, well, I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and 20 years ago it was a lot more difficult, a lot more confusing than it is today. You used to have to print all the documentation, and there would be pouches you stuff all the documents in, and hopefully you fill them out correctly, and the package will be on its way. Really, the benefit of ShipStation is it really automates a lot of the process and streamlines it, and makes it very, very easy. Right, you're not going to be able to print the label unless you have all the information needed that's associated with that shipment. So getting started is very simple. And the other thing I mentioned is, because DHL is so good at what they do, you don't have long transit times. You have full visibility to the shipments. So that makes the customer experience better. And even for new shippers, being able to kind of get comfortable with the process. DHL provides all the visibility to what's going on. But really, it's become quite simple to ship internationally. As long as you're able to identify all the information that's associated with the order.
Yeah, and start out small. Don't if you have a cottage industry making widgets, work through your networks, to get those items, I guess, advertised out into the world. motorcyclist enthusiast myself. I belong to a lot of different forums, and I've bought things internationally from fellow motorcyclists that came up with a better idea, on how to make a tool or something. So work work with the organizations that you're already familiar with, as far as, getting the word out there. If you've got an online presence, people are Googling and looking for things, and they're going to land on your page eventually, I would imagine, if you have, either a unique item or the best item. So yeah, I would say, go with what you know, and then, work out from there. The U.S. Commercial Service, part of the Department of Commerce, offers guidance on selling into certain markets and whatnot. So once you expand and you have, the capacity to fulfill, a lot of orders, maybe reach out to the folks at U.S. Commercial Service and ask them for, guidance on getting into specific markets.
Right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up from here. We're approaching the top of the hour. I do want to recognize there were quite a few questions around taxes and duties and how to calculate them. And I'll let you talk about that a little bit, George, as well. But I know we do partner with companies like Zonos and Avalara that can help with some of those calculations as well. I don't know if DHL has specific tools for merchants to help calculate some of those duties and taxes and landed costs.
Yeah, and DHL does provide like a landed cost estimator, and I assume that it's available to the public. I'm not positive though. I don't know if you have to be logged into a DHL shipping application in order to gain access to those. But DHL does have landed cost estimators to help calculate. And again, it's an estimate, right? What the costs are going to be for bringing specific commodity codes into specific countries.
Yeah. And I will say, I've seen, for example, Shopify. I'm sure many merchants on this call are on Shopify, selling on Shopify. They have some. I believe they worked with Avalara to have some in-cart capabilities on calculating some of that as well. Yeah, I think what I'll say is maybe we need to dedicate a session on duties and taxes at some point, because we do have a lot of questions there. Again, to reiterate that ShipStation, the DHL Express for ShipStation is a DDU solution at this point. If you do need a DDP solution, then we do have the ability to link your DHL Express account to ShipStation as well. So if you have a DHL Express account, you can link that to ShipStation as well, should you need that DDP solution specifically. Well, I think we're at time. We've had many questions here. We'll answer those after the webinar as well. Rest assured, we will get to you. But thank you so much, George. Thank you so much, Chris, for being our guiding lights here on this webinar. And thank you so much for the time. And thank you, everyone, for being on this webinar and learning more about the complexities of international shipping. Hopefully, we answered some of those burning questions. And rest assured, we'll send out more information with all the resources, and we'll answer your questions as they came in. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk soon.